What's up guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we are going to review the Elac debut 2.0 B5.2 bookshelf speaker. That's one hell of a mouthful and I hope I don't have to say that too many more times. Now, those of you that have been here before, thank you for coming back. Those of you that are new, let me tell you, we're going to do things a little bit differently than what you're used to seeing. Now, while in the past I have reviewed things in a traditional way where I take you through the sound characteristics and do some comparisons, and I may do that again in the future at some point, this is an aggregate style review. That means I have watched every single YouTube video I could find about the speaker. I have taken notes on all of those reviews and I have them written down in front of me. I will read those notes to you in the form of quotes from other reviewers. I will make sure to add context where necessary. And at the end, I will tell you where it seemed all the reviewers, including myself, seemed to agree. Some of these things we agreed on about the speaker are good things. Some of the things we agreed on about the speaker are not good things. And we're going to talk about all of that. Now, I respect your time, and some of you guys might be wondering, is this the best speaker I could buy for the money? If I've got $200 to $300, is this the one to get? Let me just start with the bottom line and say, no, that crown, that championship, that belongs to the Emotiva B1 Plus, straight up. At $249, that thing is in a league of its own. So if you came to this video simply trying to find out what the best speaker you could buy is for about $249, it's the Emotiva B1 Plus. I'm probably gonna say that a lot of times throughout this video. And look, just to be clear, I'm not an Elac hater. I like Elac a lot. In fact, their DBR62 is one of my favorite speakers. I recommend it all the time and I gave it a raving review. This, on the other hand, missed the mark for me. There is one or two areas where it's better than the Emotiva B1 Plus, and we're gonna talk about that when we get into these quotes. So let's just jump into them. So, first reviewer is IIWI Reviews. I like this guy's content a lot. He has a good way of describing the sound characteristics and things like that, and he gives good context for what he says also. And by the way, if you've never heard of any of these reviewers and you wanna see their videos, I'll leave links in the description below. So his first comment or quote that I got, really nice neutral balance and really nice tonality. I agree the tonality is nice. I believe that it's like a balanced sounding speaker, but neutral, not so much. I find the top end to be a little bit tilted up, a little bit bright. Now, while I'm saying I disagree, I do think it's important to give some context here. In this video, he goes on to talk about how the KEF LS50 is his main speaker that he uses. So it kind of makes sense that this Elac is going to be not so bright to him. I normally use the Bucard S400, which is a bit of a darker speaker compared to the KEF LS50, so it makes sense that I would find the speaker a little bit brighter. So I think we're describing the same thing, simply in different ways. What he calls neutral, I call a little bit bright, and other reviewers seem to call it a little bit bright also, so let's go with bright. Anyhow, his next comment, from 55 hertz and up, bass region sounds full and weighty. Now, if this quote was just this quote, I disagree with that. I don't think that's correct at all. However, he goes on to explain this quote very clearly. He starts talking about the mid-range section and how male vocals sound full, they sound weighty, how guitar plucks sound full and weighty and things like that. However, that's not bass to me. That is a full mid-range. I consider bass kind of, mid-bass, let's call it between like say 50, 60 hertz and up to 80, 90, 100 hertz. That's what I consider bass, and maybe I'm just unique in that region, and then I consider real bass 50 hertz and below. And from, real bass up to like the top of mid bass, the speaker just does not have a lot of it. And I know some of you guys might be thinking, hey Nemo, it's a 5 1/4 inch driver, what do you expect? Well, the Emotiva B1 Plus is a 5 1/4 inch driver, and it does a way better job. It sounds much fuller, it extends lower, it has better impact, more punch, all while still having good transient response, tonal texture, and note-to-note distinction. So if Emotiva can do it with the B1 Plus, so can Elac. They didn't, and that's a miss for me. Let's move down to his next quote. And he said, it lacks punch and impact. I agree, it does lack punch and impact. Another quote from IIWI, mid-range is neutral, smooth sounding, nicely balanced. I mostly agree with this, I do. I do though, however, feel the mid-range is a little bit forward. I think this is just simply another way we slightly disagree. I feel the forward projection of the mid-range gives the speaker a sense of depth to its soundstage. And if we jump to his next quote, we can see we're mostly on the same page because his next quote is, these are the best at soundstage depth at this price. I haven't heard most speakers below $200 or below $300 even, but I will admit I was impressed by the soundstage depth. The width was, let's try that again. The width was pretty good also. Width. Width was pretty good also, but the depth really did impress me. The vocalist projected in the room in a forward manner. There was good imaging between the speakers. It felt like the singer was in the middle of the room and the instruments were still in the background. That was very, very good. That's the one area where it's better than the Emotiva B1 Plus. The Emotiva B1 Plus doesn't have a bad mid-range or poor imaging by any stretch. It's quite good in those categories. The Elac is simply better at that. However, everything else, any other metric you want to use to compare a speaker, the Emotiva B1 Plus is on another level. So let's see, what else do I have from this gentleman? And this is, by the way, that previous quote, that was paraphrased. And this next quote is also paraphrased. And if you're wondering why sometimes I paraphrase them, it's because sometimes, and I do this too, you know what I mean? In trying to describe something, I go on a little bit more than I need to sometimes. And, you know, we all do this. It's just a speech pattern a lot of human beings have. So if I was to quote that word for word, it would have taken up like the whole screen because he really kind of went on a lot before he said that. Anyhow, I hope IIWI doesn't mind that I slightly paraphrased him. His next quote, again, slightly paraphrased: subpar gear will yield subpar performance. Essentially what he was saying there, and he went into more depth and detail on that statement, is that, most of the review he's talking about and the good things he talked about the speaker was when using it with more expensive gear, and that using, cheaper gear did not yield good results really. And I just feel like it's important to mention the Emotiva B1 Plus sounds pretty good with cheaper gear. As long as you've got an honest 50 watts RMS or more, the Emotiva B1 Plus just sings beautifully. So, I don't mean this to be a review where I just keep saying buy this other speaker, but I started this channel to help people make buying decisions, to help people stop obsessing, buy the thing you want to buy, and get back to enjoying your music. And this was a situation where I own both of these speakers. None of these are review samples. I own the Emotiva B1 Plus. I own these Elac Debut 2.0 B5.2s. And I was quite shocked when I was doing my A/B comparison. That usually doesn't happen. The only other time I was more shocked is when I reviewed the Velodyne DB12, which was the worst subwoofer in the world I had ever reviewed, an absolute ripoff at $1,200. And I will make sure to remind people of that any opportunity I get. Do not buy that. Do not support that company. They don't care about you. I promise. Their $1,200 subwoofer, maybe 300 bucks. If you can find it at 300 bucks, it's okay. Anyhow, let's get back to IIWI. That was the last quote of his. So let's jump down to cheapaudioman. Now, it is important to note, at the time that Randy made this video, he did not have the overwhelming amount of data points that he has now. And he bought the speaker at $200 or less, something he talks about in the review constantly. And I think that's something a lot of people forget. They hear him say all these great things about the speaker and they forget he didn't pay the 300 bucks they MSRP for. He didn't buy them for the $229 sale price they're on right now. He paid less than 200 bucks for them. And he brings that up constantly to make sure you guys all have the context. And when he's saying they're good, he's saying it's at the 200 and below price. I know Randy, I talked to him on the phone about this because I wanted to make sure I wasn't crazy, because Randy has the Emotiva B1 Plus also. And I was like, hey, Randy, the Emotiva B1 Plus, it's kind of like superior just in every way compared to the debut 2.0 B5.2. And he was like, oh yeah, like tremendously so. So when Randy's giving high praise to the Elac, it's for the below $200 category. And I'm sure if you were to ask him like, hey, if I have an extra 49 bucks, should I buy the Emotiva B1 Plus instead? I'm fairly confident he would say absolutely. And I would say even just save your money until you can get the B1 Plus. I know that extra $49 could be a lot when we're shopping in the $200 price category, but this is one of those rare situations where just a little bit more money gets you a lot more performance. And what do I mean by that, a lot more performance? And I know this isn't a review for the Emotiva B1 Plus, but stay with me. If I brought you to my home and I played the Emotiva B1 Plus for you with my treated room, with my expensive equipment and such, I believe I'd be able to convince most people with a decent ear that it costs at least double. I'm not saying it competes with speakers that cost double, but in my room with my gear, I think I can trick you into believing they cost at least double. I don't think I could do that with the Elac Debut 2.0 B5.2. I think if you heard these speakers in this room, the Elacs, with my room treatment, with my expensive gear, with all this stuff, with my expensive DAC, I don't think I'd be able to convince anyone that they costed any more than $200 or $300. And that is why I believe the Emotiva B1 Plus is superior. But let's jump back to the quotes. Randy said, depth of the soundstage is very good. I agree, Randy. Randy also said, bass is surprisingly very full. I disagree here. This is one thing I didn't ask him about. I have this quote and I meant to ask him, but I didn't. I wonder if he's referring to bass is very full the same way I was meaning bass is very full, meaning, you know, the vocal presentations are full sounding and things like that. I would imagine he doesn't mean like 50, 60, 70 hertz because the speaker just doesn't have a lot of that. I should have asked him. I'm sorry, guys, I didn't. Anyhow, next quote, Cheap Audio Man, treble can get a bit bright on these. Sorry, let me read that again. Treble can get a bit bright on these. I agree, treble can definitely get a bit bright on these. It's never too offensive, but if your gear is a little bit on the brighter side, your room is a little bit on the brighter side, and yeah, rooms can be bright or dull, guys. Or you have them towed in a lot, I could imagine they would start to become offensive possibly. So do be mindful of that. The Emotiva B1 Plus, on the other hand, do not sound offensive ever. They just sound fantastic. What else did Cheap Audio Man say? He said that they're the best speakers you could get for $200 or less. When he said that, I know that that was correct, but quite a bit of time has passed. I do not believe he still feels that way. That category has gotten very, very competitive. He has way more experience in that category than I do, so I'm not gonna say whether I agree or disagree. It's been a while since I've checked out a ton of like $150, $180, $200 speakers. But based on my conversation with him, I do not believe he still believes that this is the best speaker $200 can buy you. And you know, that leads to an interesting topic. Like, we make these videos and they kind of stay on YouTube for years and years and years. And I think sometimes the viewer kind of forgets to check that date. I've had people comment on videos I've made like 2 years ago and like correct me on like the price, for example. And I'm like, my guy, check the date. When the video was made, what I said was correct. And that's generally how this works. When videos are made and we say something is the best at this price point, or you know, it's a really competent contender and things like that, we're talking about today. That's when the video is made. We can't tell the future. Better stuff might come out in 2 months that'll just dethrone that thing. We have no idea. So keep those dates in mind, guys. All right, let's jump over to Zero Fidelity. Zero Fidelity, I believe all the rest of the next quotes I got from the next few reviewers. This is for the B6.2. They reviewed the larger model, but I still thought it was important to include their quotes because the speakers do seem to be fairly similar. Let me try that again. Zero Fidelity said, this is a speaker that's all about balance. I mostly agree. I think it's a speaker that is very even-keeled. The only area where I would say it doesn't have balance, but I guess this is how you perceive balance, is just the bass. There's so little of it. It's almost like, is it balanced if it's just like so missing? But I can see that being the opposite side of that argument is like, well, that's where the balance is. Like, it's just super safe just from top to bottom. Anyhow, his next quote, and this was a caveat he mentioned, it's so balanced and well-rounded that some people are going to feel it's a little too safe sounding. To give you some context, what he was saying in that video, because he explained this a little bit more in his video, is he was like, you know, some people are going to hear this essentially and just be like, not really impressed, doesn't really do anything special in any way. It doesn't sound bad particularly in any way, but it also doesn't sound good in any particular way. And this next review that we're going to jump into, I mean, it was the most perfect transition. I found this guy by accident. I'd never seen his content before. His name is Stereo Review X. But he is like the epiphany of the last quote I got from Zero Fidelity. His entire experience about this speaker is exactly what Sean said. And I'll say it again before I jump into Stereo Review X. So Sean's caveat was, it's so balanced and well-rounded that some people are going to feel it's a little too safe sounding. Stereo Review X's first quote, I don't much like this speaker. Hardly at all. It's kind of okay. If you've never heard of this guy, check him out. He's so candid in his videos. I absolutely loved watching his video. Again, I found him by accident. I literally clicked on it by accident. I meant to click on the video that was won over. And I am so happy I found this gentleman. I can't wait to look at more of his content. Anyway, his next quote, it delivers okay. in all fields. All right, fair, I agree. His next quote, it doesn't do anything good or great. I agree. His next quote, save up for something better. I love this. And here's the good news. You don't even necessarily have to save up for something better. At full price, these things are like $300. On sale right now, they're $229. The Emotiva B1 Pluses are only $249. And like I've said like 15 times already, they are way better. And again, I'm not an Elac hater. I like Elac. I've heard a lot of their stuff that I like. Not these though. Anyhow. His last quote, this was great. He kind of summed up his review with, it's a nearly speaker. And he went on to kind of like explain that more. And what he was saying is essentially the whole caveat, zero fidelity mention. He's like, it doesn't do anything for me. And I get that. I really do. If you think about most speakers that are like very popular, it's because they do something amazing. Now, I'm going to use some examples that are a little bit more expensive, but stay with me. Buchard S400. When that thing hit the scene, the amount of bass power it brought from such a compact bookshelf speaker blew people away. It was just so good at that. People loved that. And as a result, it tugged on a lot of our heartstrings, and it's a very popular speaker now. Let's look at the KEF LS50 Meta. Its imaging is awesome. It is so incredibly good at that. And look, it's very popular. People like it. People are, drawn to it. It's awesome at that. And you can every kind of speaker that's like really good and really popular that people love, it's got a characteristic that people just love. The Elac, it doesn't. It has nothing that is special. There's no pizzazz. It's like, I feel like if Stereo Review X would have gone on and just kept talking, he might have said something like, this is a speaker for people who don't like speakers, maybe. I don't know. Check out his review. It was great. Let's hop over to Thomas and Stereo, and then we're getting close to wrapping this bad boy up. Thomas and Stereo again reviewed the larger B6.2. He said, the voice clarity really stands out. I agree, Thomas. The second thing he said is, I hear micro distortion, and he almost didn't say that, and I'm happy he did. Now, I wrote down some context because it's important. At the time, this was the cheapest speaker Thomas had reviewed. He didn't have a lot of data points on super affordable gear. Now, Thomas, you're right, but it's not distortion you were hearing in my opinion. I think it's just the lack of refinement that is generally normal in this price category. Speakers, $200 to $300 speakers, a little bit grainy, lacking in refinement, and those of us that are used to speakers at $2,000, $3,000, $5,000, $10,000, that is going to jump out to us like crazy. Now, Thomas, you might be wondering, if you're even watching this, how come no one else mentioned it? Well, most other reviewers, they've heard more of the cheap speakers. They know like that's kind of normal, and I think most of us don't expect the consumer in this price range to have the data points to really hear that graininess, so we just don't mention it. And that's not an uncommon thing I do. If I review a speaker that's like $99, guys, I go really easy on it. Most $99, there's not a $99 speaker in the world that sounds good to my ears. I'll tell you what it sounds like, you know what I mean? I'll try to keep my own opinion out of it because I'm not a $99 speaker customer. Now, since Thomas made this review, he's reviewed a lot more stuff, and he has, so I'm sure he got to the bottom of that, but I just wanted to make that clear. I didn't hear distortion. It was just a lack of refinement. And let me give one car analogy, if you will. So if you got like say a BMW 3 Series or Audi A4 or C-Class Mercedes, fully loaded, be about $50,000. That's a good chunk of money to spend on a car. Most people will be very impressed by the ride quality, the fit and finish, the features and things like that. But for anyone who has a more expensive car in the 100,000 plus category, like a S560, a BMW 7 Series, an Audi A8 or S8, you will not be impressed by a 3 Series BMW. You will not be impressed by a C-Class Mercedes or an Audi A4. You will notice the lack of refinement. You will feel that the ride is bumpy and not comfortable. But to most people that own Audi A4, BMW 3 Series, the ride is quite comfortable because for them that car was an upgrade. But for the person who drives an S560, I think the new one's S580. Anyhow, a C-Class is a big downgrade, right? So I totally get what Thomas was talking about there, though. I really do. I heard that graininess right away, and I didn't like it so much. The Emotiva B1 Plus doesn't have that graininess, by the way. So What did reviewers agree on? This is important. Oh, let's talk about subwoofers real quick before I get into this. This speaker had no bass, so I felt the need to add a subwoofer. Pulled out my SVS Micro 3000. Didn't pair well at all. I was kind of shocked. The Micro 3000 is a good subwoofer. I thought it would pair well. It didn't. I pulled it out of the chain and I pulled out the Rhythmic FVX12. This is a fantastic subwoofer that I love very much. Pairs well with just about everything. Sounded terrible. So I thought, you know what, maybe the SVS and the Rhythmic, maybe they're too expensive. Let's put them away. Let's pull out something affordable like the Yamaha C912. That didn't sound good either. It was really hard to get subwoofers to sound good with this speaker for some reason. So it's like, I feel like that's an interesting caveat I just want to mention. Not only does it lack bass, but adding a subwoofer and making it integrate was very, very challenging. And guys, you know, I review more subwoofers on YouTube than anyone. I am the subwoofer guy. If anyone knows how to add a subwoofer to a speaker and make it sound good, it's freaking me. And I couldn't do it. The only subwoofer I was able to get to integrate well with this, and this was a Hail Mary, is I pulled out my Rel HT1205. It's the subwoofer I sit on in every video. And I pulled it out because it has never let me down. It integrates well with everything. I'm not gonna say it's been the best pairing with everything per se. It's a fantastic subwoofer, but it has always integrated with everything. And I was able to get the Rel HT1205 to integrate well, but that's like 800 bucks. I don't expect people to buy an $800 subwoofer for a speaker that's $200 to $300. Anyhow, I digress. That was just something I found very, very annoying. So what did reviewers agree on? Well, like I said in the beginning, some of the things they agreed on were good. Some of the things they agreed on were not so good. So let's jump into it. The first thing that almost every reviewer said, the presentation is balanced. Almost everyone said that in one way or another, and I agree. The next thing almost everyone said is that it had great soundstage depth. I may have not quoted everyone as saying that. I didn't write down literally everything all of these reviewers said, right? But when you watch the whole video, you will see almost everyone agrees. Great soundstage depth. The next thing everyone agreed on was they're not insanely good at anything in particular, but not awful at anything either. Everyone seemed to feel like it was just like, so it's good, you know, it's good, it's not bad, it's good, but you know, you know, nothing sticks out. Everyone had that kind of, you know, not everyone expressed it as a complaint. Some people expressed it as a complaint. Some people expressed it as a caveat. Some people said it in a very neutral manner, but everyone had that assessment, including me. Next thing, everyone said it had a clean mid-range in one way or another. Everyone said bass detail was good, but bass quantity is low. I'm gonna just go ahead and disagree with everyone here and say, I didn't think bass detail was all that good either. Maybe I'm just a snob when it comes to bass because I'm so obsessed with like subwoofers and I primarily review so many subwoofers. I have just a lot of data points with what good bass is and good bass detail is. Or maybe all the other reviewers are right and I'm just being too picky and asking too much for a speaker that is just $200 to $300. Let's be honest, that's probably what's going on. Anyhow, the next thing everyone seemed to agree on is sounds better with expensive gear, but that's a moot point. Pretty much everyone at one point or another expressed like, yeah, these speakers sound pretty good with expensive gear, and everything good every reviewer said about these speakers was with expensive gear, and they're like, but that's not cool because they don't sound so good with cheaper gear, and they're cheaper speakers. No one expects someone to buy $200 to $300 speakers and connect them to a $5,000 integrated amp. That doesn't make sense. Us reviewers do that because that's the gear we have. But we all noticed that with cheaper gear, they just, you know, everything that they were like good at, it just went down another level even, and it was just like, it went from good to just, it's okay. So now, again, I feel like this is an important moment to remind everyone the Emotiva B1 Plus sounds pretty good whether you use cheap gear or expensive gear. So let's start from the beginning. If you've got $200 to $300 to spend on a pair of bookshelf speakers, Emotiva B1 Plus, that's what gets my vote, straight up. And if you want a quick old school style breakdown of what this speaker sounds like from Nemo Propaganda, it's like this. We got a top end that's slightly on the forward side of neutral. Depending on how you set them up in your room or your associated equipment, they certainly can be described as bright. You do get a little bit more detail than usual with that extra brightness, but it is also lacking refinement and can be a little bit grainy at times. Moving down to the mid-range was fairly neutral and very clean with good soundstage depth, good imaging. I've already told you that great forward vocal presentation. I really enjoyed that a lot. That's about all I enjoyed, honestly. Anyhow, moving down to the mid bass, there's no mid bass bump. Thank you, I appreciate that. Moving down to the bass overall, there just wasn't any of it. These speakers absolutely need a subwoofer, and therein lies my caveat. As I've already mentioned, subwoofer pairing is extremely challenging. So let's wrap this up with buy the Emotiva B1 Plus instead. If you have any questions, ask in the comments below. And until next time, later.